Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 31st, 2023 Board of Education meeting. At this moment, if we could all stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If the district clerk could please take a roll call.
Yes. Adam Smith,
Present.
Deborah Brooks, here. Emily Bays, here. Adam Block,
Present.
Julie Epstein, here. Rachel Gilliard, here. Nanette Melkonian, here. Thank you.
Mrs. Brooks, I believe you have a motion.
I do. I'd like to adjourn to exec to discuss the employment matters of various personnel.
Is there a second? Ms. Bays, all in favor? 7-0. We will see everybody in 1 hour.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
across in front. Do you happen to know of a copy room that's close by?
You need a copy room? Where's the copy room?
In the main office, we can do it.
Can I have like
Wait a minute, wait a minute.
15?
Do you need a key to get in?
Yes.
15, you need?
Yes.
Okay. Can I please have a motion to reconvene into public session? Ms. Brooks, a second. Ms. Melkonian? All in favor? 7-0. We are reconvened, and with that, we'd like to offer the stage to our daily chorus for the student performance.
Okay, this is the daily intensive select course. We have just started this year, and I'm very happy to have them perform in various places around Fort Washington. We recently did caroling around Fort Washington in late December to several places. It's a very fun day, filled with a lot of carols and cheer and just positivity. So again, we started this year, and this is thanks to the Hearts Grant. So we are performing 2 songs for you today. The first one is the national anthem. So as that happens, please rise. And then the second one is Viva La Vida by the band Coldplay. Okay.
Happy
Okay. If the district clerk could please take the roll call.
Yes. Adam Smith?
Present.
Brooks? Here. Emily Bays? Present. Adam Block?
Present.
Julie Epstein? Here. Rachel Gilliard? Here. Nanette Melconian? Here. Thank you.
Great. Ms. Epstein, if you could please proceed with the recognition.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. We're going to hand out a few certificates, and I just ask that the recipients stand right over here by Dr. Block. We're going to take a picture with the entire board at the end. So, the following students receiving certificates were selected as Regeneron Senior Semifinalists. Amelia Abel, you can applaud. Amelia, come on up. This is a big deal. Be proud. Sasha Bandler, I see you out there, and Bryson Schaub. Please come up and get your certificates. I have something else to say, though, while you stand here and turn around. I want you to be excited about this. This competition is sponsored by the Society for Science and the Public, which founded the competition in 1942. It formerly was sponsored by Intel and before that, Westinghouse Corp. There are among 300 students named Regeneron STS Scholars and hope to be among 40 finalists named later this month. They could be standing right in front of us here. The scholars were selected based on their exceptional research skills, commitment to academics, innovative thinking, and promise as scientists. These students were selected from 1,949 U.S. and international entries, and they each will receive a $2,000 award with an additional $2,000 going to the high school to support STEM education. We would like to congratulate their teachers, Nicole Pinto and Elizabeth Thomas, and I think their hard work deserves another round of applause.
Great. Okay. If we can please have a motion for the adoption of today's agenda, the January 31st, 2023 meeting. Ms. Brooks, a second. Ms. Bays, all in favor? 7-0. Great. Thank you. Well, a special thank you to the Daily Chorus for performing for us today, and a congratulations to our Regeneron scholars. With that, Dr. Hines for the report of the superintendent, and then we'll go to community comments.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So first, we're going to have an enrollment report from Dr. Shields.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. The most recent enrollment report was calculated on the 25th of January. At that time, we had 5,258 students. That's 19 more than we had this time last year.
Thank you, Dr. Shields. Very quickly, I have just 3 updates for the board and for the community. One is regarding our panorama survey that ended recently. I want to thank everybody who participated, from our students to our staff and certainly our parents. Our goal was to have more parental input during this process, and I'm happy to say we doubled what we had in the spring as far as parents participating, so thank you. And we'll share all of this information very soon. The second has to do with actually some of the reason why some of you are here this evening, which is we're beginning the budget discussions And we know this is a very long process, so tonight really is the first night as this unfolds. And you're going to hear some good news regarding the budget. You're going to hear some not so good news. That's always part of the equation. And the not so good news has nothing to do with the district itself, but it has to do with some of the expenses that have, just shot up over the past year or so. So it's comprehensive. This is longitudinal in the way we do this, and as always, it is child and student centered. So I look forward to this process and working with the board and working with our administrators and making this happen. The last has to do with the TransFinder app, everybody's favorite app that nobody has yet, but it will be here very, very soon. We are beta testing the app right now in 2 of our schools, and we'll have some more information very shortly that I can share with the board and the community. That's all I have, President Smith. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions, Superintendent? No, great. With that, we will move on to community comments. A reminder, as always, community members are permitted 3 minutes to speak. If you could please sign in at the podium, and if there are questions asked, they will be answered at the following BOE meeting, if possible and appropriate. Thank you.
We have one community comment, Nicoletta Gargos.
Good evening. I have been in the school district for 18 years. I'm here to speak about email communications that involve the president of our BOE. On January 10th, an email to the Board of Ed, Dr. Hines and Dr. Allen, was sent regarding a request for the board to send to our elected officials involving COVID-related masking and mandatory vaccination at our school district. I did not receive a response at all. On January 19th, I sent an email to the Legislative Task Force, CCing my husband, encouraging them to address the same January 10th topic with Senator Martins. On January 23rd, our Board of Ed president sent an email to me and 3 other parents while CCing the Board of Ed that described the following: a consolidated summary of discussion points made between Legislative Task Force and Senator Martin's office, a consolidated response to individual inquiries, myself and 3 other parents, around masking and mandatory vaccination as potential rumors to the senator. I was not aware of any other inquiries made by these parents. Grouping, summarizing, and publishing individual and private communications to a wider group without their approval represents a lack of respect, professional courtesy, and confidentiality. My email to the Board of Ed did not include these 3 other parents, regardless of how similar or varying our inquiries were. It was the decision of our president to segment key individuals into a common narrative and embellishing our concerns into rumor as he portrayed it to the senator's office. I do hope this is an isolated incident and driven by lack of experience instead of political and or personal motive. As such, I recommend an apology to be sent by our president to myself and the 3 other parents for his biased and unprofessional communication. Indeed, the existence of New York Assembly Bill A2178 is not rumor, and that is upon our district and our legislative force to know that. On another note, 2 board members that are present today hold officer-level positions with the Port Washington Democratic Club. I wish to know
30 seconds remaining.
what is the BOE's policy for any board member holding high-ranking officer-level roles in local political parties. This portrays a perception of conflict of interest. It makes sense that board members holding a local political position should disclose their roles in the spirit of transparency and fairness. If there is no policy on such an issue, when will one be created? What are the current mechanisms or checks and balances, if any exist, to prove to the public that decisions are made in a balanced, unbiased fashion?
Time expired.
Politics have no business in schools. Thank you.
There are no more community comments.
I'll send you an email, but I understand your concern, and it was an oversight, and it was not meant to offend anybody, and certainly I don't have the bias that you're alleging. I just want to say to our Regeneron students, as much as we would love to have you here, and you're certainly welcome to stay, we're sure you have better things to do with your evening, and you're certainly welcome, and there's no shame in leaving. So we won't be offended. Yep.
Did you say, I think they high-fived each other. Thank you for coming this evening. It was great seeing you.
And with that, we're going to go to our budget discussion, item 10.1.
Thank you, President Smith. Board of Education, good evening. It's hard to believe that we have another 23-24 budget already upon us. This is the first of our work sessions. Before we get to the actual work of the workshop, I wanted to review our budget calendar. Today is our first budget overview and review. February 14th, we'll be reviewing the elementary school, the guidance department, and the PPS requests. March 7th, we'll also be reviewing other departments. March 21st, another workshop. And then April 18th will be the adoption of the budget by the Board of Education. May 2nd will be the public budget hearing. And May 16th will be when voters are asked to vote on the budget and the school board election. So tonight, what we're going to be doing is looking at the current year's budget and how it compares to our proposed budget request for next year. So first, what we need to do is start out with looking at this current year's tax levy. Current year tax levy was $150 million, which supported a budget of $174 million. So in looking at this, we have an allowable tax threshold, which is supposed to be the 2%, the lesser of 2% or CPI, which for the current year, the CPI is at 8%. So we would be capped at the 2% for growth. So one of the things we need to do is take the $150 million tax levy, and we have a growth property factor, a base growth property factor, that's provided by the Office of Real Property. And this year, it's 1.0101, which is the growth factor, which is very encouraging. This is actually related to the brick and mortar within the community, how many houses are being built and improved. We also have pilots that are estimated to increase $200,000, and due to changes in debt service, this is actually going to affect our tax levy threshold, making it probably between 1.5% and 2%. So the goal is always to achieve a tax levy that is within our tax levy threshold, being mindful of the taxpayers during unprecedented economic times while maintaining and or expanding all current instructional programs. So in looking at our budgetary considerations, there's certain positive factors and also negative factors impacting our decisions. And if you look at the scales, we have 6.4 million versus 8.3 million. On the positive side, we have increases to foundation aid that are projected for our school district, which the state aid runs have not currently come out yet. They should be hopefully tomorrow or Thursday we'll be receiving the actual runs. But nonetheless, we're expecting about 3.9 million in additional funding. We were able to secure favorable interest rates on a current bond that the district went out for. And this was based on the strong Moody's rating that we received based on the fiscal strength of our school district. The teachers' retirement system contribution has actually been projected to drop. So that remains basically flat based on the increases to salaries this year. And also the increase in the growth rate factor also allows us to levy up to a certain amount. So give or take, it's about 6.4 million positive. But then there's certain factors that are negatively impacting us, such as health insurance rates, which are increasing about 12%, and the current year rate also increased 12%. We have transportation costs due to labor issues, labor negotiations, and contractual expenses. Those are increasing significantly as well. The district is working to try and offset those by purchasing our own buses and also taking over some of the routes that we were contracting out. So we also continue to have supply issue challenges and just contractual expenditures related to inflation. So as we go through this process, these are things to keep in mind. The picture will become clearer as we're going through the budget process, and hopefully at our next workshop, we can really look at the real meat and potatoes, basically, of it. So similar to last year, we're always student-focused. That's where our budget is. It has a focus on the portrait of the graduate. Our decisions are guided by our strategic plan. So our budget is actually a reflection of the board, what they see as important and what the district values as important. We continue to meet with local legislators to discuss funding and state aid formulas. We continue to pursue efficiencies in all areas of the district budget. We are developing long-range plans for educational programs and goals. First, we're going to be discussing Schreiber High School. Now, this is our first budget work session, but the building levels and administrators have been working since November on their budget. So I would like to thank everybody who has been involved in this process because it is quite a process. The budget is really a working document, which the current year's budget is always referred back to, so that we can actually do what we said we were going to do and have a student-focused budget. So at the high school, we have 5 administrators. We have service. It's home to 1,600 students. We have about 145 teachers and about 71 support staff. And this pie chart illustrates really taking salaries out. It looks at what percentage of the budget all of these things are. So supplies are worth about 16% of the budget, equipment and textbooks 21%, contractual 31%, and BOCES 32%. Now the BOCES, this is referring to occupational education for general ed students as well as special needs students, and also the new Twilight program. So I'm actually going to look at the current year's budget and compare it to what the requests are after we kind of discuss what the highlights are. So this budget is continuing the reinstatement of the BOCES opportunities for general education students who are interested in the occupational ed area. The current year we have 10 juniors who are signed up for it, and it's been quite successful. They've gone into the culinary arts, early childhood education, HVAC and plumbing, medical assisting, physical therapy aids, power sports, and engineer repair. We also are continuing the support of the BOCES Twilight program. Current enrollment is 20 students, where in the beginning of the year it started out with only 3 students. So this is a great opportunity for students who might not have been able to cross the finish line. It's giving them extra support. They can double up on some of their course offerings to actually graduate on time with their class, or just to recover courses that they may not have been successful. This is funded through BOCES, which has staffing of a principal, a counselor, 2 social workers, a nurse, 5 TAs and 9 teachers. It's really given students success. They have about a 90, I believe it's 90% attendance rate, which is terrific for these students who may not have fit into the typical mold. 90%, yeah. Some of the other increases you'll see, we have additional funds for student field trips at the high school, supplies and equipment for the graphic design class. Some of that equipment was kind of antiquated and can't really be updated, so this will be really what's needed there. Additional funds for professional development as well for the teachers. And we'll also be finishing up purchasing equipment for the cafeteria. And these are some pictures of the tables and some of the booths that were put in, and also for the technology classroom at the high school. In this chart, it's kind of difficult to read, but in the yellow is the significant areas of change. So again, you'll see the contractual and the other. That's really for professional development and for the field trips. That would be accounted for in those codes. The materials and supplies. Also textbooks, you'll see a decrease because in the current year they've actually purchased the textbooks they needed, so it won't be needed in the next year, but there are funds to replace textbooks that are breaking or things like that. And also you'll see the BOCES code also is increasing, the 2280,490. That's increasing by 140,000 because we're actually going to continue paying for the students who were in it this year. They'll become seniors, and then we'll have another group of 10 juniors who will be able to take advantage of the program. Next, we have Weber Middle School. This has 4 administrators and about 1,200 students with 122 teachers and 68 support staff. You can see that equipment and textbooks are about 8%, contractual is 34%, and supplies is 58%, not including all of the salary costs. So this year, the supply code is actually increasing because the board is putting funds in to support student classroom supplies so that parents aren't going to have to, they will still have to purchase supplies, but not as many. There could be class sets of like scissors or markers or pencils, things like that. We also have the special projects code where grade 7 DNA Learning Center will be a focus. Grade 8 will have STAR Lab, which is an in-house science experience. There's also funds for professional development for Lead 'em Up, and also chaperone costs associated with a Canada trip. We also have in the library equipment, purchase of the maker space carts, and also there's an increase to the field trip line for students in the transportation at the middle school. And again, this chart reflects those changes that I just discussed. So you can see here that in the 22-23 budget, we budgeted about $364,000 for the middle school, and there's a slight increase of $89,000 for the middle school. Next is the technology department, which our director, Ryan Maloney, was here at the last board meeting really explaining a lot of what the technology department does and the needs of the department. Currently, there's 1 administrator, there's 7 technicians, there's 10 tech aides, and there's 2 support staff. And this accounts, they manage and maintain over 10,500 devices on 4 different platforms. And this pie chart reflects the contractual costs are 26%, BOCES are about 24%, They have equipment that's 30% and software is 15%. So here you'll see a consolidation of codes. Currently, some of the school buildings actually are purchasing their own software, but it's really more beneficial to have them in one central location so that we can look at economies of scales, where you might get a discount for purchasing something at a district level instead of individual buildings. So that's something we're looking at. Cybersecurity software, this is also something the district performed a NIST analysis, and this was something that our executive director of technology had been speaking about for quite a while. It's called CrowdStrike. So that's also in here, and you'll notice these codes have increased. We also spoke about the implementation of a replacement cycle for all of the mobile devices, as well as our network structure. So in here, you'll see there's a line that has increased $1 million. That's the state-aided computer hardware. So what we're currently trying to do is see if we can somehow do a lease purchase instead of actually just purchasing for 1 year. We could purchase for maybe $3 million worth of network and student devices, but have a debt service payment. So if that is something that we can do, that would affect our tax levy because it would be an exclusion because it's debt service. So that's why as we work at these things more, it comes into focus as we're working. So in here also you'll see various supplies and equipment being purchased. In Manor Haven, there is a need for a cafetorium system. There's a slide projector that needs to be replaced and a screen. One of the other initiatives is Wi-Fi for outdoor learning space as well. And also with the construction projects for Daly, Salem, and Schreiber, we have STEAM rooms that are being put in place. So these are for equipment such as whiteboards and also access points that need to be put in. And that's my presentation for today. If there's any questions, the administrators are here as well to answer any questions that I might not have details.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Manuel, for that presentation. So I'm sure there are going to be questions. I'm going to start this way, to my right, and we'll just go down the line. So, Adam, we'll start. No, I'm starting that way. Okay, we're going to start the other way. Okay, we're going where we started. Adam, you're first. Start, and we're working our way down.
So I guess I'd love to hear a little bit more about the state-aided computer hardware. Specifically, does that have to do with the state mandates for computerized testing?
Yes, so some of it is for the touch screens that we're in need of. Also, with the Chromebooks, they're coming to the end of their useful life. There's certain operating systems that won't be supported on the Chromebooks, so those need to be replaced. So instead of, and what Mr. Maloney had discussed at our last board meeting was, how can we level it out so that it's not, some years you have a big expenditure, other years there's not much. So this would be really to smooth things out, but if we can actually do a lease purchase, that I think would benefit the school district, because then you would be on perhaps like a 3-year cycle where the devices would still have a useful life and you actually sell them and recover money for them and then start a new life cycle.
Okay, and then the other thing that I heard that I wanted to ask about was field trip funding for, I think you spoke about it in Weber, like first, you called it out in Weber, is that getting added to any of the other schools as well? And then how much is it getting added in Weber?
Sure, so at the high school also there was funding for field trips. It's And also the elementary schools, we have been discussing it as well. So the figures, we still have to pinpoint down.
Okay, and just so I understand what the field trip funding is, and I would like, if you can just give me a sense of a ballpark, because if it's $500, then it's not worth a discussion, but if it's tens of thousands of dollars, it is. I guess the question that I have is I'm assuming that that is new funding that was parent-sourced in prior years and is now being essentially sourced to the school district?
No, so some of it is really for the transportation. There is still going to be parent-sourced, but in the past during COVID, those codes were decreased because there wasn't much traveling for field trips. So now it's kind of getting back to where the district was. So right now, I think we're at about $30,000.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Kathy, again for all of this. I'll try and go quickly. Just going back to the high school and the Twilight and CTE programs. So for next year, you talked about that we're just going to do 10 juniors and then 10 seniors for CTE. So we're increasing by 10 students. I'm curious, did we have a lot of interest that we could increase even further than that? I'm sorry, Deb. As of last year, or even I know this year, they're inquiring to current, incoming juniors or rising juniors as to their level of interest.
Yes, I know that there is quite a bit of interest in the program.
We don't have any numbers, though, at this
I
point.
don't have the numbers. I can find those out
Okay.
for you.
That's great. For last year, did we turn students away? We had 20 students apply, and we only took 10, or? No? Okay. Okay, thank you. And then for Twilight, we are keeping it at 20 this year, or are we asking for an increase in that number?
I am not asking for an increase. They said that these students do want to return. I don't know that there would be, if we had more students come, I don't know that it would necessarily necessitate an increase in funding because they do have 9 teachers and there's the basic category, like social studies, science. So they could fit more students in those classes.
Wonderful.
Right now the class sizes are small.
Perfect. And I know that it is on the Board of Regents docket as well, a topic of conversation for the state budget, that there may be more BOCES support or state funding provided so that some of these costs for some of these services can be reduced, and that would funnel down then to the school district level, correct? So we'll keep a watchful eye in that regard. My next question then quickly just goes to Weber. I just want clarifications on the classroom supplies. I know we're not spending $92,000 in scissors, right? So that supply list, just for clarification, does include more than just classroom supplies. It does have other supplies within the building that you're referencing as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct. We actually put about $50,000 aside for Weber for classroom supplies. The other $42,000, there was a recoding from the equipment codes because we have, it's a threshold of $5,000 for something to be considered equipment. So some of the codes were only like $3,000 or $4,000. So some of it is that, and some are just other materials that are needed.
Fantastic. And my last question is I know you focused on the fact that this is non-staff related. Does that mean we're having no staff inclusion, or is that at a different workshop at a later time and you're just doing equipment only and supplies?
Sure. So we will be having discussions. We're still assessing our staffing needs with the administrators.
Thank you.
So, so the contractual then is the existing staff. This for Schreiber, the almost 55% increase, and for Weber, where did it go? Oh my goodness, the 11%. So that's with existing staff.
This is not staffing in the contractual. That's other things.
Other things. Okay. Thank you. I didn't understand that. Okay. So, okay, then that's it on that question for me. I think that was the only question because Ms. Epstein had my BOCES question. All right, and then I guess we'll wait and see what the Board of Regents does and what comes out in the state budget. And those are the only questions I have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just gonna focus my question on the high school requests. And really my question, I'm not sure, Kathy, this probably isn't a question for you, but when we had funded these two programs, which I think the board unanimously supported, it was specifically because of the hoping to improve graduation rates. When would we be able to get a sense of the effectiveness of that in terms of continuing the program? Is that a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year look?
We already know it has a positive effect, and we'll be able to give a more complete status update near the end of this year.
Fantastic. That's going to be my only question. So, Ms. Bays.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask any questions about the schools because I know that this is still a developing project or, you know, as we get further in. I did want to ask a question about the technology, the increase in the state aid computer hardware. You mentioned that it could come out of, go out of debt service, which would then, did I understand you correctly? And so the number that you have here is for the leasing or is it for purchasing? Or is it one and the same and will it come out of the number?
Sure. So the number here is if it were just to be purchased. Yes.
So but if we were to lease it, would it be at this, do you think it'd be a lower cost? Or would it be the same, but it would have a safer?
So that's a discussion that we're going to be having, Dr. Feeney and Mr. Maloney and myself, hopefully later this week, early next week. It would actually be moved to a debt service code. It wouldn't stay here. I'm thinking it would stay about the same because you would be able to purchase a larger amount all at once. So if you did a lease for $3 million, your payment might be $1 million each year. And you could just purchase more now, so we wouldn't have to wait to make the purchase.
So I'm sensing that you would prefer to do it in a leasing type of environment, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Means you were really thorough. I actually just have one small additional question about the Twilight as well. Ms. Epstein hit most of what I was thinking about, but it sounds like we may have more applicants for it this year. In the past, this past year, we didn't have to weed them, right? We just filled to that spot. So there's no criteria on how we would differentiate, or we'll just try to accommodate all of them if we can, whoever comes to us.
Yes, that's correct. It's as the students, as situations arise, it's a solution for them. So it's been so successful. And from what Dr. Bear was sharing with me, there's a good bond there between the principal and the teachers and the students where they're really making progress with the students and it's changing their lives, which is great.
I mean, I think it's amazing, right? That's
Yes.
what I think all of us were hoping
Yes.
in
Yeah.
funding that program, is that it would be a life-changing. It's wonderful to hear that that's already the case. A little question on Weber. I think you've already sort of alluded to this, but you have these two codes, one that's decreased by 70%, one that's increased by 400%. That's all just, we're moving different things around. Right, I know that you've been on a quest since you got here to sort of clean up our budget so things are where they make more sense and where people can be efficient about our spending and track it a little bit better.
There is actually a reason. So the first equipment code, if you'll remember last year we purchased those babies and also the screens, the curtain for the auditorium. That's why there's a large decrease. It went from 25,000 the prior year to only 7,000. And
Okay.
then below, that's actually the library code. So last year it was only 1,400, but this year they're purchasing the MakerBot cart. So
Okay.
that's why that increased.
So this is not a question, but I actually am glad that you raised that because I wanted to pull that piece out, the library equipment makerspace cart, because several of us, Ms. Melconian, Ms. Brooks, and Dr. Hines and I were at Weber today for one of these tours the BOE has been doing at the building, and Mrs. Javelin was showing us the library and sort of talking us through this progression of trying to make the library a more vibrant hangout space where there are things for the kids to do. So I wanted to just pull out for the public that this is something that's happening, and I think it's wonderful. I mean, we've heard comments and complaints and questions from middle school parents for literally years about the fact that these kids go from 5th grade to 6th grade, they're kind of the same stage, the same age, suddenly there's no equipment for them to play on, and they're just supposed to be hanging out like high school students. So this really wonderful thing is happening at Weber, and I think it's great that we're giving the district financial support to it. We could already see it in action today in the library, and I think it's great that we're expanding on it. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. A lot of my questions were asked. I'm looking for clarification on the technology page. It talks about the Chromebooks needed for College Board and ACT. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sorry, Ryan, would you mind helping out with that? I'm not really sure.
Good evening. Yes, so part of what seems to be in discussion and is coming down from both the College Board and ACT is that they're looking to bring those tests computer-based. Similarly, we're also expecting that Regents will follow in that vein, but we don't know all the details, whether or not, certain, like if they're gonna need touch screens for those tests specifically, but we know that they need them for 3 through 8 already. So it's just really makes kind of a logical sense to extend our expectations that these other formative assessments are gonna also demand some touch capabilities within their assessments, or that it'll give our students a leg up in some way than not having that feature.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You know how much I love College Board and ACT.
Okay. I think, Dr. Hines, you wanted to end with something, correct?
I do. First of all, thank you, Kathy, for this first leg of having these conversations related to the budget. I just want to be an optimistic realist right now. And Kathy, if you could just maybe clarify for those who are listening both here physically and virtually. When we look at the positive factors as far as the increase in foundation aid anticipated, that's great news, right? And I think it's a pretty decent chunk. And you talked about the favorable interest rate on the bond that was locked, all the other stuff, the fact that the TRS is relatively flat, if not a little bit of a decrease. But when we look about the negative impacts, especially with health insurance and the rate increases there, and you have that scale, right, of 8.3 and 6.4, there is a difference between the two. Do you mind just briefly explaining what that means right now? Because I want to, again, be real about where we currently are without making it sound like the sky's falling, but I just want to have a very clear understanding of what that means.
Sure, so that means you need to balance the scales so that the 6 million that is positive is offset, more than offset, by all of the expenditures. Like health insurance is supposed to go up about $4 million, which basically wipes out the 3.9 in foundation aid. So with the state aid runs, we're hopeful that we're going to receive more funding. We're going to have to take a critical look at the budget and what's in there and really fine-tune things so that it remains student-focused, but we're really going to have to look at things. Yeah.
Thank you. And then the second thing, Julie, I know you asked a question about interest with the CTE program of BOCES. We're happy to report that we have, it sounds like 37 students who are actually interested, which is a major uptick compared to last year. So to be continued.
Okay, thank you very, very much for the first of many future budget presentations this year. Okay, great. Moving on to our second and final discussion item tonight. We had some community requests, both through community comments as well as through email. I think the specific request was, will the board write a letter to our state legislators advocating that there wouldn't be a COVID vaccine mandate in public schools? So we need to answer that question about whether or not we will do that. Again, apologies for not responding to your emails, but I was waiting for the board to have the conversation in order to answer the question. But should have told you that in the email. So in any case, here we are. I did informally straw poll the board by telephone individually, and we did decide that we did want to discussing it today, so that's why it's on the agenda. So I'm going to open the discussion to people's thoughts about how we take this, and I guess we should start on the opposite end if you guys want to. Or this end, I think we should start on. We started on that end last time. You said no, now you say no. Can I put you on the spot and start on this end? Or the question is how do we proceed? I mean, does everyone want to write a letter? Do you guys want to talk about writing a letter? Do you have a question? Go ahead. You can start, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll start. So just to clarify, I think the ask is writing the letter to our elected officials, including the governor. Because I doubt we're going to be able to meet with the governor. We met with the delegation of Ms. Bays, Ms. Epstein, Dr. Hines, and I met with Senator Martin's office on January 20th. He was called out for a personal emergency. He wasn't there. So we met with Barbara Dono, who is incredibly smart, capable. I think it was an amazing meeting. It was a very productive meeting. And so the issue was raised at the end of the meeting asking, because we didn't know about any legislation at the time. There was no legislation at the time. And so we asked Ms. Dono, do you know of any legislation? And she said, no, I don't. And the senator doesn't know, but we'll ask. And I said, we'll do the same. And it was stated, well, in any event, how the district, based on what the board last year, even though we're the same people, it's a new year, and how the board felt about the unfunded mandate aspect of it, the administrative burden aspect of it. And so that was spoken in person to the senator's office, and it will be communicated similarly to the assemblywoman's office. So I think in terms of writing a letter at this point, I don't know what value the letter would add to those particular individuals, given that they have a personal message from the district already. I will leave open the conversation about writing a letter to the governor. I will say that while there was no legislation pending while we were in the meeting, we were kind of scratching our heads about the legislation, several days later, Assemblyman Dinowitz introduced his bill, and that is the bill that Ms. Gargis referenced. So when we were meeting with the senator's office, we did not know that there was a bill pending, and the senator's office did not know there was a bill pending. And we also asked whether the governor had any intention. We said, we don't know any fact behind this, which is why it was called rumor. Do you know what the governor's going to do? And the answer was, no, we don't know what the governor's going to do. So I'm just sharing with the board that framework for what was communicated to the senator, or the senator's representative, in case the board wanted to say, yeah, we need to do more, or we think that we did the most effective thing with respect to our electeds. And so I just wanted to share that, and also to clear the record that there was no bill then pending in either the Senate or the Assembly.
Deb, just to be very clear, because the trustees saw the same notes that you forwarded to me that I forwarded to the community members. What was exactly conveyed to the senator's office? Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So to be clear, I conveyed to the senator's office what we discussed as a board last year, that as a board, we had a conversation amongst ourselves last year and agreed that we would convey to our legislators the mandate of vaccines would be one that would be unfunded and an administrative burden on our school district. And that was the conversation we had. What I think we need to do now, but again, that conversation was a conveying to the senator's office what the board of last year discussed, when we were posed with the same question and the same problem last year, and the same, by the way, legislation did exist again last year. The governor never followed through on it. And so we sat here as a board and discussed again, because the community wanted to know, where do we stand? And we took a stand as a board that we did not want to have any unfunded mandates that would cause an administrative burden on our staff. That's what we conveyed. I think the question that we have before us this year is, where does this board of this year stand on that position? And do we, as this board, want to take a stand again or not? So that's what I think we need to address.
Right, and I think we have to be very clear, because the question that was posed to us, I think this week or late last week by email from another community member was, again, we can decide if we want to answer this or not, was not just to take a stand of it being an unfunded mandate, but on its merits. Do we want to take a stand for whether or not we, I guess, politically think that there should be a vaccine mandate in schools? And is that something so it's really two different questions that we've been asked. So, Rachel, I see you looking. Do you want to contribute to the conversation?
I mean, I'm fine with weighing in. I think, I don't think school districts should be making health decisions as a general principle. So I don't think it should be up to us. Personally, I think it would be wildly premature to do something like this. I don't know how they could possibly mandate a COVID vaccine when nobody can even give a clear answer on when you should have a COVID vaccine, or when you should have a booster, or whether you should have a booster, or who should have the booster, or what the side effects are for various people with other conditions when they have the booster. And I say all that as a person who believes very strongly in vaccines and science and medicine, and I'm happy with saying I'm vaccinated myself. But I think making certain kinds of decisions as a person talking to your doctor is different from a state mandating a vaccine. And the vaccines that are mandated currently have very clear information on when they must be given, or a range of when they must be given. And I don't see how a public health entity could, at this point, give guidance with enough specificity that it could be put into the kind of concrete, like set in stone rule that vaccine mandates are. I don't have a problem with the fact that We have obviously already communicated with our legislators the financial burden aspect of it and the administrative burden. One of the conversations when we discussed this in terms of HPV and other vaccines several years ago, things like what we discussed then partly was like a flu vaccine, it's an annual issue, right? As opposed to some of the other vaccines on the schedule. So I think that's basically where I stand. I don't have a problem with what we have already communicated. I don't actually think we need to go further. I think it's probably more effective that we have the one-on-one conversation. I also don't know that the effort and time to do the letter will do anything but waste more of the bandwidth that we get with the legislators, which is not huge and unlimited, and we have a lot of things that we want to communicate to them. I definitely don't think that we should be taking a political stance, because I think this is a nonpartisan issue and it shouldn't be a political issue. It should be really something that we stay out of in terms of anything that's political.
So I'm going to agree with Ms. Gaillard that I do not think we are in the business of, the health business, and I think it's Dr. Shields, I don't know that's your famous line from our COVID meetings back in the day, is that we're not in the business of being the healthcare business, we are in the business of educating. And so I do think, though, that so we have, to your point, we've already started a conversation where we did reiterate what we spoke about last year, and if the board still agrees that we're on that same pathway, I think we should have the same conversation with our assembly person. And I also think that it wouldn't harm for us to put together a letter. I know we've been sent copies of letters that other school districts have had. I don't think it would do any harm. I don't know that it's going to be seen by the governor either, but I think for us to be able to say exactly that we are in the business of education, and that anything that the governor mandates, she needs to understand that our job is to educate and not to put us in a administrative burden. I don't have a problem writing that letter to the governor as well. So I think the more school districts potentially that are writing to the governor, and we do have a Long Island representative that I know from the governor's office that would get that letter. I think the more that she hears from us, the better maybe, but I wouldn't have a problem writing a letter, our own letter, not what we've been sent, but a letter that really talks about our issues as a board and what they pertain to our school district.
Julie, go ahead.
So I'll go on the front. I just wanted to say that as a part of this discussion and knowing that the question was before us and that it was coming up, I did, as I frequently did with COVID, reach out to NYSBA and our advocacy groups who do have a direct line to the governor's office, and throughout COVID really had a finger on the pulse. And I just want to share some of the information, and then I'll give my opinion as well. So this was an old bill in fall of 2021. This particular assembly person has the reputation of reintroducing bills, and they go nowhere, and it has yet to be picked up again it's only an assembly bill. It remained assembly bill last year. It is still only an assembly bill and has no companion in the Senate. Now, between my conversation, and I'm sorry I have my back to you, but my conversation with the senator, or with the representative from NYSBA, is we had a very big conversation about their relationship with the governor's office and how much they've been involved in the COVID conversation. And he said at this point, that has not been the conversation, and typically the Department of Health, the governor's office, is involving NYSBA, not always, but it has been their practice to involve them, especially when such a very important conversation that does have a lot of traction comes arise. So he said so far it has been very quiet from their office and from their standpoint, but they keep a watchful eye. So I would say in that regard, and taking all of this into consideration, I don't think that it hurts for us to have those conversations in public with our representatives to tell them about, and I agree also, we are not in the business of healthcare, we are in the business of education and mandates. And at this point especially, this would be the worst unfunded mandate that would cause such a great administrative burden on us, it would overwhelm us. And from that standpoint, I think if we want to write a letter, I don't think it's going to hurt or help. I think it might be premature to use Rachel's word at this point, but I do think that as a board, we can stay committed to watching this legislation and the direction that it's going, and that if we see it is getting any traction or it has a companion bill, that we can revisit the conversation and we can make that as part of our docket to see if we need to take any more or further action in that regard, or whatever direction we want to go. That would be my recommendation. So to be clear, I think we should keep a watchful eye and be aware of what's going on. If we want to write a letter, I'm fine supporting it from the mandate and administrative burden perspective.
Okay. Adam? Nan?
I don't have any other comments. I think my colleagues have said it all.
Nan, do you want to have something?
I agree with everything that's been said. I have one question for clarification. Last year, did our representatives from the Legislative Task Force meet with the Governor's Office representatives?
We met with our legislators last year, yeah. But, with the Governor's Office, we didn't meet with the Governor's Office, we met with the Long Island representative for the Governor's Office, and yes, we did say that. We did bring that up at that point.
So that, again, if we're going with the philosophy that speaking to representatives personally is the most effective, perhaps we should be scheduling a meeting for that again this year. Has that been scheduled? Are we considering scheduling that?
It hasn't been scheduled, and according to our priorities, there was no, if I'm not mistaken, there was no meeting that we were going to schedule with the governor's office. And we're going to try to reach out to the Long Island contact about some of the other issues. But, I mean, if the board wanted, this would actually, obviously be added. We had a very short list going to the governor's office as opposed to our state legislators. A very short list, and this is something that would be added to that list if the board
that was
agrees.
going to be my suggestion. I agree with everything that's been said so far. The only other piece I would ask is whether or not we want that meeting to take place as well.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm hearing no letter from Ms. Gilliar. I'm hearing letter from Ms. Bays. I'm hearing let's wait and see. So I'm not sure what everybody's
I'm going to go down and poll everybody.
Okay.
Because I think we have letter and topic of letter. Please.
I just want to say one more thing. Even though the legislation has never made it out of the committee in the Assembly, never gained traction, never had a companion, I think that that's not a reason. I think that I think that should not be a factor to be considered, because what happened in the past is not necessarily what will happen in the future. And because I can't predict what will happen in the future, I think it's necessary to look at what is there now as what is there now, and not assume that just because it didn't go anywhere last year, it won't go anywhere this year. I'm just saying to be on the side of caution, and it likely won't go anywhere, but we don't know that. So, and also, and we don't know what the governor may try to put into the budget bill, into the omnibus. And I mentioned that to Ms. Dono in Senator Martin's office, and I asked her, because there was somebody apparently who had read the proposal cover to cover, I think during bedtime or something, some other state senator. And I said, is something you think that the governor will sneak in? And her response was interesting. She said, I think it would be politically bad for her to do that, because she knows, the governor knows, that there have been issues with young children. And let me know if I'm misspeaking, if I misheard her. But she said something about that. She said, how can the governor not be aware of the effect some of this is having on children? And this is from a Republican senator's office, where she said, I think it would be really unwise. I can't see her doing it. But even so, because we're not mind readers, we don't know what's happening in Albany, I wouldn't want to take that to the bank either. So I'm just sharing with the community what my thought is. I think in person was the most effective thing we could do. But if the board wants to write a letter and send a letter about the administrative burden, the financial burden, if you want to take a
Yeah,
vote.
so I'm going to say that, Adam, you didn't give your opinion about what you want to do. So,
That is correct.
right, okay, just making sure. So I'm okay. I would actually like to write a letter. I think it really, Rachel, you articulated the reasons why it doesn't really make sense for them to put a vax mandate in place today. And I think that we could say something similar to what you said in addition to the administrative burden piece. That being said, I don't know that it will do anything, so I don't feel strongly that we do it, but I would be comfortable doing it, almost using your words.
I wasn't really advocating
Yeah,
even
I
for
know.
putting that in the letter. I was just saying this is where I personally
Yeah.
stand, but that's the reason I think it's totally premature, because to me, there's just literally no way they could do this, and I kind of, on one level, resent the fact that, again, here we are talking about this health, COVID-related stuff, when we should really be talking about education and how we can make the education in Port Washington better.
Right.
So I would like to deal with it as expediently as possible, but I really do like Ms. Epstein's plan of keeping an eye on it, because I also think if it were to move into a position where it looks like more of an actual possibility, the letter we write might be very different than the letter we would write today,
Sure.
which I think would be a very vanilla, please don't make us spend money on stuff kind of letter. So I personally would wait, but have it be something we keep an eye on.
Emily?
So
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Julie was first.
So, no, can I just make a suggestion? So it sounds like we all, if I could just try to get a sense of what everybody's been saying. No, wait. What I want to make a suggestion is that it sounds like everybody seems to agree that we'd be all comfortable continuing our conversations with our legislators about the burden, the administrative burden that a vaccine mandate would cause on our school district. I recommend that we continue to have our conversations with our legislators. I do recommend that we try to find out, because the person who was our Long Island representative from the governor's office that I had the contact info from last year as part of the legislative task force is no longer there. He left. So I don't know who the governor person is. So I would recommend that we continue to have conversations, because at this point, and I know based on personal past experience, having conversations goes a longer way than writing a letter and especially writing a form type of letter. They just kind of get thrown in the recycle bin. So I recommend that if we're all comfortable with the concept that a mandate would be, and we haven't heard from administrators this year, but they did tell us last year what a burden it would be to have that type of mandate on our nursing staff, on our teaching staff, on our principals. I recommend that we continue having that conversation. And as Ms. Epstein said, if something becomes a NISBA alert for us, because that is our advocacy group, that is the group that really speaks on behalf of boards across the state, and it's a more powerful group than one group, then I think we should come back and write a maybe stronger letter. But that's what I think maybe we can close the loop on.
Julie?
Well, they don't call us Gemily for nothing. I was going to say the same thing. So, but even more succinctly or clearly, just add it to our list of things we talk to them. So Deb has a long list of things we speak to everyone. We will just add it if everyone's in agreement for the same reasons outlined and move forward with a watchfly.
Rachel?
Can I just ask the question that Emily sort of alluded to? I'm assuming we still think it's going to be the same administrative burden that we thought last year. Like, this is all the same. Okay.
So I think the best thing at this point is we have four choices. Do nothing, speak to the legislators, write a letter on administrative burden, or write a more forceful letter against the vaccine mandate. So I think we should just, those are the four choices. So just go down, just gonna go down the line and pick which one you wanna do, and I'm gonna note it down in majority, I guess plurality rules. So, one of the ends has to
I'll
start.
do it.
Okay.
I thought that Emily's suggestion was a good one.
Adam gets legislators.
Legislators. Legislators, and keep a watchful eye.
This is the least fun choose your own adventure I've ever participated in, but I'm on the same page. I think that's fine. We continue the conversations with our legislators and just keep an eye on it. But let's not revisit this at every single meeting until then.
Okay. Nan?
Agreed.
Okay.
Oh, and I just wanted to say that I sent the link to the Assembly bill to Senator Martin's office to say, this is now real, this is now live, this is what we're talking about, don't support this.
Okay. So we are going to continue to speak to our legislators, and we will watch this very closely. And if we see more action, either through NISBA or through our own general reconnaissance, we will take it up again, I guess, at that point. Okay, moving right along. We're going to the committee reports. Policy and personnel. Ms. Gilliard.
So the Policy and Personnel the committee has not met since our last Board of Ed meeting, which means I cannot give you a lengthy update. Our next meeting is actually on Monday, February 6th at 9:30 a.m. in the annex. The agenda and attendant policies will be online on the calendar.
Thank you. Budget and facilities. Ms.
Yes, budget and facilities, as you'll see on the agenda, we did meet. We have two recommendations from the meeting prior. We were discussing the Guggenheim Meadow and the Sands Point Preserve. Due to some of the contingencies and encumbrances that we were advised of, we thought that it may be best to establish a subcommittee to determine whether it's more worthwhile for us to utilize the land as opposed to sell the land, both from either a facility or curricular benefit. The committee, we said, should include community, educators, and facility representation. Formal establishment of the committee would take place after we receive the discussion, which is in February, and the results from the energy performance contract, and also in addition to our demographic report, which is probably coming out in April, because we feel that that information from both of those parties might give us a very clear picture of how we could benefit from using the land as opposed to selling the land. So that's the first recommendation, if the board is good with us proceeding with that. Establishment of a subcommittee, which will be at the end of the year.
How would that subcommittee be established? Would that be, I'm assuming you would chair it, or you would appoint somebody from, would it be committee members, or like?
We said we would have community members, educators, and Brian Graham Facilities. I actually would like to put Brian Graham on it as the liaison for the, from the educator standpoint, and then depending on if we have a board member on it, they could share it with that person, and then we could send out a form to see who'd be interested, just like we do with any of our other,
That's what I was curious.
organizations.
Would you follow the normal committee?
I would,
Yeah.
personally,
That works.
yes.
Right. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I didn't hear your question, Adam, I'm sorry, the second question you just asked.
Just if, because it's a subcommittee, I was just curious if they had thought about a process, because I don't think we had discussed like the process for forming subcommittees.
That question
But
I
it
heard, I
sounds
thought you asked a second one after that.
Did I?
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I was just reiterating the question. So I think it's a great idea, so I'm fully in support. I think anybody else want to?
I mean, I'm on the committee, so I'm in full support of this recommendation, but I think that we would have choices on how to form it, and I think the Budget Committee could discuss that again as it gets closer.
Yeah, but I think we're gonna kick this, kind of, remember our goal is to not bring things back and forth, so what I was hoping to do was leave this now in the hands of the Budget Committee to go ahead and form the subcommittee and, I guess, report back. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying
Okay,
trust
I
us.
thought you were saying that it was gonna come back to the
No,
board.
I'm saying trust us, we'll do it in a
That's-
good way.
that's what I
We'll
wanted,
We'll
yeah.
pick one of the approved ways to do it.
Awesome.
Trust us, we'll pick our friends. But we are doing it at the end, we're moving it, we're waiting till the end of the year. Okay.
Is there a reason that we would wait until the end of the year? This seems like something that, I mean, because my issue with subcommittees is generally that it just kicks the can down the road and down the road. So could we put like a hard
Gotcha.
stop?
Oh. Like, well, we thought we would start it in May. Most likely, it's going to then take off in the fall and really do most of its work next year and be one of the budget priorities for next year from that Budget and Facilities Committee. And you've never been part of my committees. I make sure we keep track of things.
So when do you think the board will have a recommendation from the subcommittee to the committee and the committee to the board?
But how about December? We'll give you a December date. And if it's before then, I get a lollipop.
Deal.
Go ahead.
Adam, I think an important detail here is what's right in the recommendation about waiting till after the energy performance contract discussion. And the reason and the demographic report. So the reason for waiting until after the energy performance conversation is that this piece of land could theoretically be used for some of that. So Brian Graham told us he would take that into account as one of the options. It could elucidate for us a potential use of the property that would benefit the school district financially. So it would be important to know that. And then the demographic report was because if we're deciding whether to sell off a piece of land or use a piece of land and how a piece of land should be used, we should know what our numbers look like as a school district and what the trends we think are going to be in terms of our enrollment into the future and the changes in the community, which the demographic report will give us. So I actually don't think it needs to wait until the end of the year. I know you want a hard date, and I know, Ms. Epstein, I want to step on your toes. I know you said May, but I would be in favor of forming it earlier if we have that information that allows us to form it and get them
If we
started.
can, I think we were told April is the earliest we'll see the demographic report. So, and I know April is a very busy budget month, so I don't want to tax any of our offices that way, which is
No,
why
you're
I
right.
gave us a
totally-
grace period
I
of
totally
May.
agree with you, but I think that piece is an important note, right? Like, we're not picking May out of thin air. It's that this other information, it doesn't make sense. We've had in the past conversations about, whether we should have ponies or a pool or whatever, but it seems like if we are really wanting to do some solid planning about what we could do with this piece of land, we need to be able to brainstorm it with all the data to back it up. And so that's the only reason for the wait, is to have the extra information that we need.
Okay, I can live with December.
But he wrote it down, trust me.
Then, do you have anything, Deb, you want to add to that? Okay. Then we had a second recommendation. It is budget season, so we were super excited to discuss the RFP process. And as the Board of Education, we work directly with our professional services, of which both our external and internal auditors and our attorneys have not gone through the RFP process for 5 years, which is a customary term when you would do a reevaluation. We are just making the recommendation that we conduct an RFP for our external, internal auditors and attorneys. We did put the proviso on there that the audit committee be part of the review process as is stipulated as part of the audit committee's charter as outlined by the comptroller, but with the ultimate approval by the Board of Education, of course, and that the Board of Education should definitely be part of the review process actively for the attorneys. Completion of this entire process will probably be hopefully in June because we are going to include all of these entities on our July reorg agenda. So I gave you a date on that one. Is that good? Is the board okay with that?
And that's before December, Adam Block.
Of which year? Yeah, so I just want to, Dr. Hines, you're okay with, there was some conversation previously about possibly the reorg being too soon to go through a full RFP process, but I'm comfortable with the concept, but you're okay with that timing?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else not okay with this? It seems pretty appropriate and routine. Okay, so go ahead with both recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next budget meeting, which is always entertaining at this time of year, is February 13th at 9 a.m.
Thank you very much. Do you want to do audit while you're?
I would love to
Mike?
do audit at this time, sure. We also have a recommendation from the audit committee. We met with our internal auditors, Naraki Smith, and they went through, I just want to give the board an update that they advised us that our safety and security audit is in process and should be planned for a draft report to be presented in February to the business office and then and the audit committee, so we have that right around the corner. However, in talking to that and going through our internal audit results, which or assessment that we just approved at the last board meeting, we saw that we moderately scored in some of our cybersecurity areas. And the recommendation that was made is that while we've performed this NIST assessment and we are moving forward in that direction to add some of our, as you heard, increased cybersecurity technology, that it may behoove us to incorporate a more in-depth audit NIST gap analysis so that we can just stay on top of where we are in the cybersecurity world. So the recommendation is to obtain a proposal from Naraki Smith to perform a NIST gap analysis that's more detailed and an update report to further examine our risk in this area. So it's just a proposal, as long as the board is okay with that. Okay, everything looks good. And our next, I'm not going to give the next date for our audit committee because we may be changing the date based on the results of the February safety audit. So we may be moving it up from an April date to a March date. And we'll keep you apprised.
Great. Thank you very much. Ms. Melkonian, Curriculum Committee.
Thank you. We have not had a curriculum meeting since our last BOE meeting. And I'm sad to report that we are delaying this Friday's February 3rd PEP review meeting, and it is now rescheduled for Friday, March 3rd. Please join us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now. We added, it's actually not on there. Oh, it didn't print it. I'm sorry, it printed very much. So 11.5 legislative task force, go ahead, Deb.
Okay. I didn't add my action items or my recommendations into the agenda, and I apologize for that, but I have two separate packets. One is from our draft minutes. I've been having some technical difficulties with sharing the document with the members of the legislative task force who are not on the portnet.org network, and IT is actually aware of the problem, and the problem's on their end, so we're working on that. So legislative task force members, you've not been forgotten. So rather than go through everything we discussed, I'm just going to go through the action items. The first one was a discussion about meeting with our congressman, and given that the Nassau-Suffolk School Board decided not to interact with the congressman, the question was posed, what should the legislative task force do? What should the board do? And the recommendation, the unanimous recommendation from the task force was that we hit the pause button for a while to see what happens within the political landscape. And so I'm coming to the board to ask if the board is okay with that recommendation. I have a variety of action items for the board, but for this particular one, if I could get a sense of the board. I know how Ms. Epstein and Ms. Bays voted in the task force, but I guess it's here.
Let's just go through these, and if anybody is against them, they can raise their hand. Otherwise, we just.
Is anybody against that?
Yeah.
Wait, so, let me, why wouldn't we meet with Santos?
The feeling was that there's so much turmoil swirling around. He's just stepped down from his two committees. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Understood.
Temporarily.
Most famous congressman in America.
Temporarily. And so the question was, do we feel that it is an efficient use of our time? Do we feel he can be effective in his position? Do we follow the lead of the Nassau-Suffolk School Board? Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association Board, their actual board, that has said we are not going to meet with him. We're pausing. Do we follow that lead? And the recommendation from the legislative task force was yes, we follow their lead. And so I'm coming to the full board to say the task force felt it would not be an efficient use of our time to meet with him or his representative. And so that's the recommendation to the board.
It was in the newspaper this week that he hasn't taken any phone calls from local representatives anyway, so I don't think you need to interrupt.
That's understood, but that's different than us having a policy that we're not going to meet with our.
It's a pause. It's a pause. So it's a question for the board.
You know, this could help, Dr. Block. Typically, from a legislative standpoint, we have not met with our federal congressmen that often because most of our issues really are just state level. And currently on our docket, I don't think we have any federal-related issues. Is that correct?
We must have one because it was, and I can't pull, I could try to look it up.
Okay, not
But
one
we
that's
must-
coming to our immediate mind, right?
Correct.
So again, the priorities are not necessarily federal at this time, not that they won't be later on in the year, but just at this moment.
So I understand that. It's not clear to me why we should have to vote on.
I don't think we do, so unless you object to it.
Well, because we made it a priority, we made it
Right.
part of the action step, and so I don't feel, procedurally, I don't feel comfortable. I mean, the priority was, this individual was on our priority list, and so if we're going to take him off of the priority list, there was a procedure to put him on our priority list. So in my brain, there needs to be a procedure to pause him on the priority list. And I'm not going to do that by myself. So I'm looking.
the question to
It's
you,
the
Adam, is
majority,
do
it
you have an
sounds like
objection
only
with it?
Adam Block is
Yeah.
questioning. Does
So let's-
anybody else have a problem?
I think it's only me.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one was regarding the electric bus mandate that came out of the Environmental Conservation Committee. We have an invitation, a soft invitation from Senator Harkam, who chairs the Environmental Conservation Committee, to meet with him. He's not our state senator, but he's very knowledgeable about the electric bus mandate. He's spearheading a lot of the initiatives, and so we have a soft invitation to meet with him. This was also outside the purview of what the legislative task force had originally discussed, but the task force has come back to say, yeah, if the full board gives your blessing to meet with him, let's try to meet with him, and let's try to invite our own state senator to that party. So I just want permission to meet with that senator, and they may end up saying, no, we got your letter.
I'm sorry. I think that is an equivalent use of time to meeting with Santos's office. I don't think this electric bus mandate is going to go anywhere, and I don't think that's a particularly good use of the legislative task force time. I accept that I will likely be in the minority here, but I think it's not a particularly good use of the legislative task force time. There's a lot of other stuff.
Anybody else? Anybody else object?
I don't object, but I just want to clarify to Adam that the electric bus mandate is an actual mandate. It's not something that's in the air. From what I understand, it's written down, correct, Kathy? Okay.
I fully understand that. I think it is an impossible mandate that will just get kicked down the road. I think it is extraordinarily unlikely that it will ever apply to us. And so I don't think it's a particularly good use of our time to meet with someone who's not our state senator and prioritize that.
But I think by advocating with people like that is why it will keep getting kicked down the road, because there'll be continued pushback.
I mean, that's a fair point.
Any other objection? Just want to make sure. So yes, the majority of the board says yes. Okay. Next. Oh, my goodness. Okay, there was a universal free meals recommendation that came out of the legislative task force to support legislation that supports universal free meals and adding that to our priority. I'm asking the full board now, do we want to add that initiative to our priority list? It's so as background, Congress temporarily funded universal free meals for all universal for students during COVID. That ended in May 2022. In June 2022, a senator from, I think, upstate introduced legislation to make universal free meals forever, but a new thing at the state level, not funded by Congress, but a priority at the state level. Many state organizations, educational organizations supported that. It went nowhere during the 21-22 legislative session. It's now back in play, and the legislative task force recommends that this be added to our list of priorities when we are talking with our state representatives. And so I'm asking the full board what the full board wants us to do.
I support that initiative.
And we have one yes.
I don't support that initiative without more information about how it would be funded and where, like, conceptually, I think it's great, but I personally would not support us advocating for something like that that has a questionably large cost to some group of taxpayers. That sounds undetermined at this time. I don't think that's something we should be advocating for. It's not a school expense.
To be clear, I would never have wanted to do that if it's going to be a burden to our community in terms of the tax base. So I love the idea. I don't want it to cost us and make it a problem here to our budget.
It would be to some group of taxpayers, state income, federal income. Someone's got to pay for it. So what I'm saying is I don't think we should, I'm not saying it would be our taxpayers necessarily through their school tax bill. I'm just saying I don't think we should go advocating for something that we don't necessarily, that's just my opinion.
In the spirit of the task force, this came up at the very end, and we didn't have much discussion as a task force. So maybe, Ms. Brooks, we could just take this topic back to the task force and do a little more research on it, right? Because we really didn't discuss it, and then we can bring it back to the board when we're confident we have the specific details.
I agree, because I don't remember us actually talking about it on the task force. It was more like, I thought, a new business topic that we didn't really discuss amongst ourselves. So I think that's a better suggestion. Let's get some more research, some more information, and see if there's even, going back to our earlier discussion, is there any traction on it? Is there any discussion on it? Is it on NYSBA's watch list or anyone's? And let's see if that's something we should talk about. Yes? Okay.
I'm in agreement on that too. I just would like more information. I'm 100% in favor of funding for school lunches for children who need the financial support, right? Every child should be, which we have, right? But which we have the funding for, and also our school district makes sure that no child is hungry at lunch, right? Like from a policy perspective too locally. But that extension of whether or not lunch should be free in schools, philosophically, I'm kind of with Mr. Smith, like, yeah, it's great. Like, we absolutely should, but I also think we should have foreign language in the elementary school, and we don't, right? And I think I could come up with many other things like that, and if the pie is only so big, I'd like to know what we are losing if we eat a piece of the pie for that, for a population where the parents can pay the pretty nominal fee for school lunch. So I just would like more information, and I don't know that I would put it on the top of my priority list.
Okay. So at the December meeting, as pursuant to a conversation that happened at the December Budget and Facilities Committee meeting, there was a discussion here to take the zoning law issue where the local zoning law conflicted with what school districts might want to do with property and bring that to the legislative task force as a priority to have the board use the legislative task force to make that a priority. And it was discussed at the December meeting, yes, we want it to be a priority. At the most recent budget and facilities meeting, after further discussion about the law and other issues, it was decided maybe this shouldn't be a priority. So I'm coming back here to say, you giveth and you taketh away. So do we agree this is no longer a priority?
Not a priority. We want to keep our mouth shut on this issue.
So that's 3. I say not a priority.
Great, you have a quorum, I'm majority.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to talk about it? Okay. All righty. Okay, during our meeting with Senator Martin's office, the meeting was open with Ms. Dono asking us, have you heard about the New York State Housing Compact? And so after a discussion, the trustees and Dr. Hines agreed that this should be brought to the full board as a high pushback priority with permission to partner with the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards Association in their advocacy efforts. I will say we haven't seen all the details of what this means. We don't know what effect it will have on Port Washington because we don't know what all the details are. We don't know if there are waivers. We don't know a lot. There's a lot we don't know because the proposal is just a proposal. It hasn't been fleshed out into law. And so I'm coming to the board to say, once we see exactly what the law entails, do I need to come back and ask if this is a high priority if we see that it is going to negatively impact our schools?
No, you don't. I think you should
Okay.
go ahead with that.
Good. So it's a priority. Great. Bear with me. Okay, Ms. Manuel. So reforming the civil service certification is something that you brought to us last year, and now it's on the governor's radar. And you had asked us, please, I'm sorry? Everyone's ready, yes. Please help get in a meeting with the Nassau Civil Service people so we can have a heart-to-heart talk with them, let them know our concerns. Now that this is a pressing issue in Albany, it has the governor's attention. Is this something you still want to try to get a meeting, or do you think that it's no longer necessary?
I'm happy with the priority up at the state level. I would still like to get a meeting. I don't think it's something the task force needs to put together for me, though. I think it's always good for school districts, the business office, as well as the personnel office, to have that relationship with the civil service department.
So I understand now you're no longer asking the task force to be involved. You're going to handle it however you want.
Yes,
I want to be clear. Surely. Okay. And that was it for the priorities. I sent you all the draft of the charter. I would like the board's permission to make the ministerial changes in terms of the numbering and the lettering and the ordering, nothing substantive, so we can clean it up and have a better look at it. Do I have everybody's okay to do that? And the Foundation Aid Subcommittee. We formed a Foundation Aid Subcommittee during the Legislative Task Force. So they're going to, they've already met? Okay, they've already met. That's great. And so our next Legislative Task Force meeting is March 9th at 9:30. And we have a meeting with Assemblywoman Gina Solitti this coming week. With County Legislator DeRidgie Witten this week, and I will follow up with Assemblywoman Solitti this week as well.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Brooks. That was very thorough.
Well, there was a lot that happened.
I know. Okay, so moving on, we added for this meeting only the Emergency Preparedness Committee. So going back, originally we had talked about having security as the discussion topic for this meeting. And one of Dr. Heinz's goals and our goals had been to be prepared to discuss that today. But when we actually pulled all of the participants of the Emergency Preparedness Committee together, it was quite clear that what all of them felt was necessary was to hire a professional firm to do a security assessment. So Misters Miller and Graham went out and spoke to all of their colleagues on the island and got names of 2 firms who do these recommendations to try to see what these assessments to see what that would look like and if it was something that was to be presented to the board. And they did so, and I actually found out this morning that they actually went ahead and conducted interviews with those firms in order to make a recommendation to the board that the board go ahead with a security assessment. And then Dr. Hines was one of the people who was involved in those decisions and interviews, so I'm going to give the floor to him to talk about why this is something they want. And again, tonight the idea is, and we attach these not to ask for a vote on this, but rather to give an example of what one of these proposals would look like, and so that we can decide if it's something that the board wants the administration to go and actually negotiate and bring us a contract that would be. So I'm gonna let Dr. Hines talk, and then he's gonna explain it, right? Yeah, whether or not the board conceptually is okay with this recommendation to go ahead with an assessment. We're not actually going to vote on a contract tonight because it came in this morning. So the concept is, does the board agree with this use of time and expenditure of, $18,000 and change to do an assessment like this? So I want Dr. Hines to explain that thought process and why. And again, we don't need to do a formal RFP because these firms can or cannot go through BOCES, correct? Yeah.
All right, so let me just go through a timeline real quick. The Emergency Preparedness Committee met last on January 9th. And within that conversation, we decided that we would interview 2 security agencies to see what they have to offer as far as conducting a security assessment. And this is what they do for a living. They go around to school districts. Some of them look at universities, but there's one in particular that I'll talk about this evening that just focuses on school districts. So the one that we really, when I say we, there was a subcommittee formed at the Emergency Preparedness Committee meeting, which was Dave Miller, myself, Ryan Maloney was there, as was Brian Graham, and we had Detective Gazzello there as well. And so we met with the 2 companies, and we really liked what Ivy Plus Associates had to offer as far as conducting this assessment. Think of it as a comprehensive audit as far as what we have from soup to nuts. And what they would propose is to conduct interviews with administrators, with subgroups of teachers and staff as far as their thoughts related to security. Doing an assessment for each building so that they would spend time in every single building, reviewing processes and protocols, looking for vulnerabilities within the district itself. Recommending corrective action measures. Clearly, after they do all of this, they spend all this time and personnel moving forward, they would come up with some corrective action measures. On top of that, they would review the district-wide plan that we have and each individual building plan that we have as well. Included in this would be a review of technology, the way that we utilize technology, entrance and exit points, so on and so forth. And then, I think for me, just as if not the most important, has to do with the current structure as far as how we utilize our guards and the structure that we have in place related to having a part-time coordinator, which, as most of us know, is also serving as an assistant principal. So the price point for this audit and assessment would cost roughly $19,000 is what they proposed to us. And again, once they're completed, they would make recommendations, they would share their findings, and then we would move forward potentially with what they are sharing. I've said this from the get-go since I started here 3.5 years ago. It's not that I think we have that our security force is not doing a good job, but I think we can do a much better job. We have amazing security here, but I think it's time that we really take a deep dive into what we have. I refer to it as a mom and pop shop, and I mean that in the most loving way, and I think it's time that we upgrade what we have.
Or at least see if other professionals think that we should upgrade what we have. Yeah.
So, Mr. Smith, I'm sorry, I still don't understand the ask for this board tonight. Are you asking
The
us
ask is
to approve this?
we're asking conceptually if the board would like to go ahead with an audit like this, in which case there's not a contract that's ready to be voted on tonight, but we didn't.
There is a contract that you gave us,
To see, but this is not a final
but
contract
that's
that's
the
been
number that
negotiated.
Dr. Hines just mentioned as well.
There's a dollar amount, yes.
Right, so, okay, I'm gonna wait till the end because I'm
Yeah.
still very confused, so I'll listen to the rest of the trustees.
Go ahead. Ms. Gilliar.
So if I'm understanding correctly, there's a second firm too that was interviewed. Is there a second proposal coming from that firm, or we only asked for one proposal at this point?
So we interviewed two different firms. This subcommittee really felt most comfortable with what I just presented with Ivy Plus.
So are there other companies in this space that we should be looking at, or is this like, these are really the two people who do this thing that we need them to do?
So based on what Dave was familiar with and what Brian has been familiar with in previous districts, these are the two that really surfaced to the top as far as, the main two to focus on.
Okay, and my last question is procedurally, this process is just sort of an informal process where we approach various consultants and ask them for their information.
Yeah, so let me hit the rewind button for a second, because at some point, I would like for us to have a conversation about security. And I think in order to have that conversation, we need professionals who know what they're doing as far as what security entails to make recommendations for us, especially if we have to budget for more expenditures somewhere down the road. I've talked about the possibility of restructuring what we have, but it's one thing for me to say it as a superintendent, but it's another thing for professionals who do this for a living to make that recommendation. So that's part and parcel of the reason why we're doing that. And if we're going to have, I think, a constructive conversation about security, this is a good first step that in order for us to talk about things that we may need to upgrade.
So with that information, philosophically, I'm willing to say I'm definitely in favor of doing an assessment of our security. I think that you'd have to have cotton stuck in your ears and be cut off from electricity to not know that school safety is a huge, huge issue. And we have been very lucky here, but I think it is luck. Which, by the way, just to publicly say, is not to say that I think our security is bad, because I think that we have put a lot of work and a lot of physical upgrades into the buildings and a lot of procedures in place to make sure that our buildings are secure. I think we're doing that. But we're educators, and I think it makes sense to have people who are experts in security come take a look and advise on whether or not we should do something. That said, I'd love to know if other districts are doing this in our vicinity, and if they are, who they're using. And I am definitely not comfortable saying, even informally, that I'm good with this number publicly, because I believe in negotiating. And so I'm very much not good with this number, and I'd like it to be a lot lower.
Ms. Epstein.
I am in favor of a security assessment. As you know, the audit committee is currently have an outside consultant, and while that has been deemed different, I will say that some of the benchmarks listed in this assessment overlap the audit committee or the assessment happening. So, for example, in this audit committee assessment, they're interviewing key employees. They're doing on-site field work consisted of conducting walkthroughs and participating in a drill exercise at the district. They're obtaining documents and analyzing the records, including Board of Education policies, safety plans, building access reports, and drill exercise reports. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I think we heard some overlap. So in the effort to be effective and efficient, because I do understand that this entity is going to do a more in-depth physical assessment, maybe we can reduce the price or at least knock off some of the aspects of what they're looking at if we already have another company analyzing it. Why pay for the same thing twice? My only other concern, though, with this particular company is that within the proposal, they also recommend how they could provide the staffing for what their recommendations may or may not be. And I am very uncomfortable with an organization, a consulting organization, coming in to tell us what's wrong. Oh, but for an additional $250 an hour, we'll help you implement even more, and if we just use our people. So if we were going to move forward with this particular organization, I would want to make sure that our contract was very specific that we will not be utilizing their services beyond the consulting so that we can have an unbiased assessment as they're going through.
Yeah, so actually, both of your points are very well taken, and actually both came up when this name of this firm was brought up at the first, so I will say, the first point, Mr. Graham and Mr. Miller, because I raised exactly this point about the audit committee, they're the ones who have been, I guess, responding to that, the two of them, and they felt that the level of the questions was very different than what they're envisioning in this audit. So I think that, but I think it's a very good point that should be brought up again, saying, okay, well, once the report comes, let's see how much of it truly overlaps with this firm. So I think that's good. So just to, and to your second point, one of the committee members who's an FBI agent made the same point and said that it would be very bad practice to hire the same firm to do the remediation who did the audit, and that was something that would be made very, very clear. So, in fact, like, absolute no-no. So, really the ask today is, and again, this recommendation just really by coincidence came this morning from Mr. Miller. I guess that he received the proposal today. It has not been negotiated. We didn't bring the lawyers in to look at it, so it's not on the agenda. So the question was really, does the board conceptually want to engage in this type of process before we allocate administrator and legal time to really solidify the proposal and, you know, negotiate the wording and the language and the price as well. Obviously, Ms. Gilliard, we would go back, or not we, they would go back and negotiate the price, but they're not authorized to even begin a negotiation, which is why we're here. When Ms. Milconi's been raising her hand. Yeah.
Have we had an assessment done in the past? And if so, what year and how often is it recommended that we do such a thing?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, I will. Not that I'm aware of, and if we have, it must have been a long time ago.
I will say that there is a process through BOCES that's done every year, but it's really like, have you made sure the fire extinguishers are recharged? Are the AEDs charged? Are the tags on everything? Yes, yes, yes. There's a new state requirement that you have this meeting. Raise your hand and say you had the meeting, and that's done, but it's really not equivalent to what we're talking about.
So can I just, the reason I'm asking, do I think we should have a security assessment? Do I think we should have a comprehensive audit and look at what all our, you know, problem areas, if any, and how to fix them and put in a corrective plan and have a big picture discussion about security and who runs our security, if there's a response? The answer is 100% yes. And as you all know, I always think, what's the big picture? Like, look, what's the plan? How are we looking at this? Where I am confused is when we put this emergency preparedness committee back together, and I don't remember what month it was this year that we did that, that's what I was told they would be doing, because they were the FBI agents and the security experts. And that was the reason we were creating, once again, this committee, so that this committee could assess our security issues, which would be different than our district safety committee, which I think Ms. Malconian, you were getting your answer to, that meets once a year. So what I'm hearing now is that we got a lot of experts in the room who said we need to hire other experts other experts. So I don't have an objection to having outside consultants coming and assessing. But then I believe it belongs, because the health and safety of students falls within the Board of Education's purview, and the Board of Education is responsible. Then I don't think it should be filtered, that we should be making these decisions. And I also would like to point out that the committee met on January 9th, and this Board of Education got this information at 4 p.m. on the 31st when we were meeting at 7:30. So I think what I would like to see is the notes from the committee and more information about what was discussed. And I would like to see the comparison of the other group. I mean, I think it falls within our purview, I'm sorry to say, and you all know I've spoke very strongly about putting together the Emergency Preparedness Committee back then, and I was assured that they would be doing the job that now we're being told we should pay consultants for. So this is where I'm a little confused, sorry.
Yeah, so I don't think that that's accurate, but what I will say is when we got these experts together in the community who are experts, they were unanimous in that a paid professional audit was what was required, and effectively that is the recommendation of that committee. The committee, I think, if the board wanted to, could be sunset at some point. Really the advice from these individuals was to have an audit done, and I think that would be presented to Dr. Hines and the board, and we could bring it back to the Emergency Preparedness Committee and these individuals for feedback on it, but I really think that that's what their recommendation is, and I think it's a good one.
Let me just go back real quick to the subcommittee. I shouldn't say subcommittee. I'll just talk about Detective Gazelle. You had.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's a subcommittee.
Yeah,
it's you guys met and interviewed somebody.
We had. Yeah. I don't want to make this complicated. We had two organizations. We decided as professionals, this is the one we want to go with. Can we go with it? Should we negotiate? And we should negotiate. I think Rachel brings up a really good point. $19,000 is a lot of money. Can we reduce that cost? And so if I'm able to reduce that cost by having this conversation, that would be great. My recommendation would be if the board can give me, some sort of parameters as far as what that price point would be. I can go back with Dave and just with Dave and Brian and say, listen, can we move forward? Because we felt comfortable with this organization.
Rachel.
I don't have a problem with that, but if we're going to do that, we should recess to executive session, because nothing can undermine your negotiating ability more than creating a public record of what your cap is.
Yes. So we'll negotiate the dollar amount or the cap in exec if the board is conceptually okay, obviously. Yeah.
We'll tell the newspaper.
Right. Okay. Anybody else on this one? How do we feel about?
I definitely support the idea of going external.
Ms. Brooks? So we definitely have a majority who conceptually wants to go ahead, so we can talk. Actually, we're going to be in exec probably later tonight, and we can very briefly bring this up. Okay. So can I have a motion for 12.1, which is the approval of the minutes from December 7th Policy and Personnel Committee, January 10th BOE, January 23rd Special BOE meeting, which was the brief meeting to approve 2 contracts, and the Audit Committee meeting of January 18th. Ms. Melkonian, a second. Ms. Brooks, all in favor? 7-0. Great. Moving along. 13 action items. Can I have a motion for the approval of 13.1.1 through 13.6.3? Ms. Epstein, a second. Ms. Brooks, all in favor? 7-0. Look at that. Okay. Item 14 is what everyone's been waiting for, the 2023-2024 school calendar. We can vote on this. Does anybody have comments or questions? Ms. Brooks?
I do have a question. So I see that the last day of spring recess is April 30th, 2024. I understand that will be the makeup snow day number 2 after makeup snow day number 1 in May, if we have snow next year like we didn't have this year. My question is, if there are snow makeup days, would it be a remote day? Or would it be an in-school day? I tried to take cover. I just had to ask, only because April 30th is the last day of Passover.
I'm so glad you asked that question. So we've had discussions about this, and we are hoping we don't have to go over those snow days, but it is a conversation that we've had about the possibility of a remote day. Yeah.
And I know the 2 snow days are built in, and I understand I understand that April 30th date is the second extra snow day, right? I understand, but.
We've spoken about this, so I will say it's something that we're strongly considering. We've had some interesting conversations about it. Okay.
Ms. Epstein? Okay.
Don't worry, I'm good.
Can I have a motion for approval of the 2023-2024 school calendar, 14.1? Ms. Brooks, second. Ms. Epstein, all in favor? Great. So to everyone who's been asking, the school calendar is now approved, and hopefully we can get that on the district website or in an email blast tomorrow. Okay. We have no board policy on the agenda, correct? Ms. Miller, no board policies, right? Great. Old business. Dr. Hines, you were going to answer number 1. We had a question about how the aftercare program decision was made.
So this is, so the question that was asked at our last board meeting had to do with how that decision was made. And, without getting too much into the details, it was a conversation clearly that took place, well, I'll say, it definitely took place between administration within district office and along with Dr. Pernick as well. And we thought it was a very thoughtful and deliberate process and the way we went about it. Now, I know there have been some ripples, negative ripples that impacted some families, and we certainly understand that. And I think it was really a learning experience for all of us because this was new and something very different. And I know Guggenheim really, I think, just because of the circumstances that were around what was previously there before, it made it a little more challenging than it needed to be. And certainly, our apologies for the families that were impacted by that. But where we are right now, I think we're in a much better place. And I appreciate the parent who brought this, to our attention. It has been shared with us before, but we're very thoughtful to the best of our ability and very deliberate with the way that decision was made.
And the second response was regarding the COVID vaccine, which we discussed at our discussion item. So I believe that question has been answered in its entirety. Does any trustee have new business? No. Okay. So we're going to move on to item 18, which is our second opportunity for the community to be heard.
Regina Marino.
And how many are there?
There are only 1.
Okay, great.
Good evening. I'd just like to add some points to consider while keeping a watchful eye on the legislature regarding a mandate. What Ms. Gilliar is saying could never happen is already happening. State University of New York already has a mandate. Parents are college shopping and sending their kids to out-of-state colleges at an increased expense for the sole purpose of avoiding mandates already in place. The issue does affect the district aside from an unfunded mandate, as there are many families who will pull their kids from district to homeschool or move out of state, as we've already seen a record number of people that have fled the state due to the existing mandates. To think that a K-12 mandate won't happen because they can't figure out when to give the shots is a naive approach. And Mr. Smith, your point that the board needs to continue to advocate so that the can keeps getting kicked down the road with regard to electric buses applies to this bill as well. The fact that a bill is only pending in the Assembly without a companion bill in the Senate should give the board little comfort, because a Senate bill could be brought forth and could move quickly to a floor vote. You may be keeping a watchful eye, but inaction at this point may be at the district's peril. Thank you.
Liz Millman. I was definitely not planning on speaking tonight, but some of the comments that I heard have changed my mind. New York State Bill 82178, sponsored by Dinowitz, has been introduced on January 23rd. At this current time, countless colleges and universities have the mandate and have denied entry to students solely based on their up-to-date COVID vaccination status or lack thereof. They do, in fact, track each dose. They refer to it as up-to-date, as I'm sure you know. Rachel Gilliard, you expressed your unequivocal disbelief that such a mandate could even happen at this time when there are so many variables, assuming you're referring to doses. I wanted to briefly refresh your memory with a story. There was once a time when two girls, daughters of mothers who are active in their children's education, found themselves in the same class outside of their regular school. One day, one of the daughters stopped going to this class. The reason? A mandate was put in place. The child was told she was no longer allowed in this particular school building, regardless of her personal medical situation. This child was forbidden to enter the building. It was monitored. She was left out. This was 2022. Let me assure you, this bill is real. It takes a hot second for a bill to progress, and we have all seen that happen before, sometimes just a single day. You don't want to waste time discussing health issues with this board, so don't. Just have respect for the families in the community that you were elected to represent. 25% so far, as of today, of Long Island school districts felt compelled to write a letter to the governor. But a letter or no letter, as another member said, who knows if the governor will even read it. However, advocating for the families against this mandate would simply demonstrate respect for the parents to make a decision for their own children. Either way, when the result of that decision has zero effect or impact on any other child. And no, I don't believe that speaking on behalf of the children on a current and imminent problem that this district may face is a waste of your political capital. Even though I do recall hearing that exact same sentiment by another board member in a similar situation back in January 2019, who is no longer sitting on this board. Thank you.
There are no more comments.
Thank you. So, we are going to recess to executive session. Someone will make the motion in a moment. We are not planning to conduct any public business after that point, so the video will be turned off and we will adjourn from publicly outside of the high school conference room. So, do we have a motion?
I'll renew my motion because we weren't able to finish what we began discussing before the public session.
Do you want to make the motion?
I renew it, so to continue the conversation, to discuss employment issues of particular individuals.
A second. Ms. Epstein, all in favor? 7-0. So thank you for everybody who attended tonight and for the comments.
Our next meeting is
Yes.
unfortunately Valentine's Day.
Yes. See you all in
The
2 weeks.
14th.